last night was not that. What the world has witnessed since the killing of George Floyd on Monday has been a visceral pain, a community trying to understand who we are and where we go from here. I'm joined today by Attorney General Ellison, by Major General John Jensen, the Adjutant General of the Minnesota National Guard, Colonel Langer of the Minnesota State Patrol, and Commissioner John Harrington. I spoke this morning with Reverend Jackson, who, much like Valerie, said a prayer for our state, said a prayer for over those grieving, said a prayer for peace, and then also said something very important. This is the moment where we start, but every time we get to this place, we never start the process to make sure it doesn't happen again. And that commitment amongst leaders in our community, watching this happen across the United States, watching another name be added, and for those of us who are old enough, to Rodney King, to Mike Brown, and unfortunately now we've added George Floyd. The situation on the ground doesn't allow us at this time to tackle those issues. The very assets in our community, our libraries, our businesses, those nonprofits and government entities, our light rail system, are all shut down from this. We have to restore order to our society before we can start addressing the issues, before we turn back to where we should be spending our energy, making sure that justice is served swiftly, and that we learn something from what George Floyd gave on Monday. Now, I want to just be very clear, and I'm going to have the team talk about what transitioned last night when the state assumed responsibility over the security near the 3rd precinct, where the state secured critical assets, and where the plan going forward to ensure that tonight our buildings do not burn, our citizens are secure, and that space that we're going to create allows us to get back to the conversation of serving justice and making sure that we're not adding to that list of unheard names. And I want to be very clear and speak to that community. The very tools that we need to use to get control, to make sure that buildings aren't burned and the rule of law collapses, are those very institutional tools that have led to that grief and pain. I understand clearly there is no trust in many of our communities. And the differentiation between the Minneapolis Police Department that we witnessed losing trust of those they're there to serve is very difficult for people to make for those standing up here with me. I understand that. And I will not patronize you as a white man without living those lived experiences of how very difficult that is. But I'm asking you to help us. Help us use humane way to get the streets to a place where we can restore the justice so that those that are expressing rage and anger and demanding justice are heard, not those who throw firebombs into businesses that our communities of colors have worked so hard to build back up areas that were blighted at one time and are thriving because of their entrepreneurship and their hard work. A library in an area where our children, as we know, are institutionally put behind, and the achievement gap for our communities of color is a shame on this state that we continue to admire by talking about and don't repair it. And that tool to help with that burned last night. So I want to just call out very, very clearly, as we put a presence on the street to restore order, it is to open that space to seek justice and heal what happened. I will not in any way not acknowledge that there's going to be that pain, but my first and foremost responsibility to the state of Minnesota is the safety and security of all citizens. We cannot have the looting and the recklessness that went on. We cannot have it because we can't function as a society, and I refuse to have it take away the attention of the stain that we need to be working on is what happened with those fundamental institutional racism that allows a man to be held down in broad daylight And thank God a young person had a camera to video it, because there's not a person here or listening today that wonders how many times that camera's not there. These are tough questions. These are things that have been brewing in this country for 400 years. We have people out there putting themselves on the line to try and put out fires in our firefighters that are under attack. Those are the things I'm asking you. Help me restore that order. We will do that under state leadership and state guidance. You will hear directly from them of once that decision was made around 12:15 last night, and that first mission was executed around 3:45 at the 3rd precinct, we will see a difference. So I'm asking you, and you'll hear from them, to talk about this. I also want to think about what happens when we don't have that. People who are concerned about that police presence of an overly armed camp in their neighborhoods that is not seen in communities where children of people who look like me run to the police, others have to run from. So I understand that that's out there. But last night I got a call from a friend and a dedicated public servant. Senator Torres Ray called in her district, and it was on fire. And there weren't any police there. There weren't any firefighters. There was no social control, and her constituents were locked in their house wondering what they were going to do. That is an abject failure that cannot happen. We must restore that order to that. Senator Torres Ray has fought her whole life on these issues of inequities and making sure that people's voices are lifted up. But what she understands is none of us can lift those voices. None of us can tackle these problems if anarchy reigns on the street. I also want to address an issue, and this one is on me, and I will own it. Earlier this morning, when this mission was carried out under my direction to resecure the 3rd precinct, to do so in a manner which I am proud of how it was executed by this team, no injuries and no loss of life, a reestablishment to put the fires out for those businesses. A CNN reporter a crew was arrested by the State Patrol. A few minutes after hearing that, I was on a call with CNN President Jeff Zucker, who demanded to know what happened. I take full responsibility. There is absolutely no reason something like this should happen. Calls were made immediately. This is a very public apology to that team. It should not happen. And I want to be clear for those of you listening. I think our Minnesota's reporters know this. I am a teacher by trade, and I have spent my time as governor highlighting the need to be as transparent as possible and have the press here. I failed you last night in that. And it does not escape me that we are here on the catalyst that lit this spark by what happened with a police detainment of George Floyd, and the idea that a reporter would have been taken while another police action was in play is inexcusable. So to CNN, to the CNN team, to the journalists here, this is about having a plan, and that's what these folks are going to talk about. This is about having an aggressive approach to understanding what the community needs, to not coming in heavy-handed with them, but to create space where the story can be told. In a situation like this, even if you're clearing an area, we have got to ensure that there is a safe spot for journalism to tell the story. The issue here is trust. The community that's down there that's terrorized by this, if they see a reporter being arrested, their assumption is because something's going to happen that they don't want to be seen. And so that is unacceptable. We will continue to strive to make sure that that accessibility is maintained, that not only that, the protection and security and safety of the journalists covering this is a top priority, not because it's a nice thing to do, because it is a key component of how we fix this. Sunshine, disinfectant, and seeing what's happening has to be done. So again, I appreciate President Zucker's call. I appreciate his understanding in a situation that he was rightfully incredibly angry, and that falls squarely on me. That apology has been issued, and I think going forward to make sure it doesn't happen again. It's time for us to clean our streets. It's time for us to execute today in a way that shows respect and dignity to communities. I'm going to ask for a lot of help today of those folks who want to see it. It is my expectation that justice for the officers involved in this will be swift, that it will come in a timely manner, that it will be fair. That is what we've asked for. I have been in contact with Hennepin County Attorney, and I am confident that those very things I just said will happen. We will continue at the BCA to do a fair, a full, and a swift gathering of all of the evidence involved. But I would reiterate again, for so many of us, not all that's done in every other case where all of that evidence is gathered before, and I would ask that the swift justice be carried out. So Minnesotans, your pain is real. The chapter that's been written this week is one of our darkest chapters, and we can choose a few things. We can choose to try and get past this. We can choose to put a force out there and stop things from happening. We can hope that in the midst of COVID-19 or something else, it passes by and we don't have to turn that mirror to look at the harsh reality of those underlying gaps, whether it be healthcare disparities, whether it be educational disparities in our communities of color, whether it be policing disparities in our community of color, whether it be wealth acquisition in our communities of color, are all very real. We pride ourselves on a state of openness. We pride ourselves on a state of being friendly. I've talked a lot about One Minnesota. That wasn't on display last night. I don't naively think everything heals and you come to the forefront and you say it'll be better. This is a community that demands and should expect more than words. They should expect results. Lieutenant Governor Flanagan and I have tried to make equity the center of everything we've done. But obviously in Minneapolis on Monday night, there wasn't a lot of equity for George Floyd. His family is probably wondering where the One Minnesota is for them. And that's on us as Minnesotans, us as the governor and the team that works with me, to put the things in order to establish order in our streets, to establish and rebuild trust in our communities, to lift those voices up to be heard, not pleading for their lives, but demanding the changes necessary so no one else is put into that position. So I would like at this time to turn it over to Minnesota's Attorney General, Keith Ellison.
Governor, thank you. Martin Luther King said many years ago that riot is the way that the unheard get heard. He didn't condone it, but he said to the nation, as a person who always protested peacefully, that don't just dismiss that and ignore it and relegate it to just criminality and bad behavior. Actually ask yourself, what's going on there? And is it something that we as a society absolutely must pay attention to? I think we must pay attention to it. I'd like everyone to recognize the fact that the National Guard just a week ago was administering COVID-19 tests to help people, The presence you see on the street, don't react to them the way you might react to the Minneapolis Police Department. It's not the same group. They have different leadership, different authority, and their job is to try to bring peace and calm back again. Please remember that this is not the group that you associate with unfair conduct, but it's a group that, in fact, just a week ago was trying to make sure that Minnesotans could survive and thrive and live because we are still in the middle of a pandemic. It is that sense of service where they get involved when it comes to natural disasters, storms, floods, rains, diseases. Now they have to restore order on the streets. And I hope that the community who is protesting will protest peacefully, but not see this as another occupation by another military force. It really is to make sure that there's calm and peace and that everybody can operate peacefully. So please accept it as that. I'm asking that of our community. It is essential, and I've said this before, everybody keeps asking the question, when? And this is a perfectly legitimate question. It is important to know that under Minnesota statutes, the primary jurisdiction for criminal prosecution is with the county attorney in which the offense occurred. And I believe that the message has been sent and received that the wheels of justice must turn swiftly. Not unjustly, expeditiously, thoroughly, fairly, but swiftly. It is important that people have confidence that accountability, no matter who you may be, is how we live in Minnesota. Let me also say that this prosecution, this investigation, this criminal process is important, and it is, and the whole country and the whole world's looking at it, cannot solve the problem. As the governor so eloquently said, events like this start and they come to a conclusion, but we never start the process of real reform. I will submit to you that myself and Commissioner Harrington, under the leadership of the governor, have already started a process on the working group on preventing and reducing deadly force encounters with the police. We have a report that we want attention from the legislature and the entire community on, to focus on that so that we can really get to the bottom of this when it comes to issues of use of force, when it comes to officer wellness, when it comes to community healing and a whole range training issues, all kinds of things that bear on this issue. And it's not just those things. I believe that the real work of our working group is the implementation of this, and that really begins in earnest now and is more important now, I think, than ever. So I just want to, as I conclude my remarks, I want to say that we have to have a situation where Lake Street, a precious jewel of our state, is a place where Minnesotans can walk again, where businesses can be safe again. But I want to be clear that if the message was this situation with Mr. Floyd is intolerable, absolutely unacceptable, and must change, that message has been sent and received as well. And the governor, myself, the lieutenant governor, all of us are committed to that long-term change. And I can tell you that I spoke with many legislators who feel the exact same way. People in the philanthropic community feel the exact same way. So I think we're going to do some real changing. We're not just going to fix the windows and sweep up the glass. We're going to fix the broken, shattered society that leaves so many people behind based on their historical legacy of being in bondage and servitude, then second-class citizenship, and now fraught with disparities from everything from incarceration to housing to wages to everything else. And so with that, I want to hand it over to General Jensen, Major General Jensen, who will further elaborate. Thank you very much.
Good morning. I'm Major General John Jensen. I'm the Adjutant General of the Minnesota Army National Guard, and I've been the Adjutant General since November of 2017. And what I'm going to describe this morning very quickly is the actions of the Minnesota National Guard since we were mobilized under the Governor Walz's executive order. Like many Minnesotans, I woke up yesterday morning to the news that the Minneapolis mayor had requested National Guard support. The only difference was I opened up my phone and there was a text from Commissioner Harrington. It wasn't the newspaper or the morning news that notified me of that. So immediately yesterday morning, I made contact with the commissioner, and we began planning on the potential employment of the Minnesota National Guard in support of Minneapolis. For those of you that may not understand how emergency management works in Minnesota, I'm just going to take a quick moment and explain that. In Minnesota, county emergency management coordinators or the mayors of Minneapolis, St. Paul, Rochester, and Duluth may request National Guard support through the state EOC.
We are listening in here.
with
We're
that,
listening in here as officials in Minnesota address the situation involving the death of a man at the hands of police on Monday, and then the subsequent unrest that has occurred in the streets of the city with the rioting and fires that have taken place there. A clear message from the governor of Minnesota, followed up by other officials in the state, and there we are hearing from the head of the National Guard in the area. But we want to be able to drill down on this in that community and to be able to hear from one of the local voices in Minneapolis. And we're joined now by Minneapolis City Council member Philippe Cunningham. Philippe, situation very much developing. Let's just first talk about your reaction to the situation that is unfolding, both with the death of Mr. Floyd on Monday and the reaction that we've seen in the streets in the last few hours. Sir.
Yes, hi, thank you so much for having me. I think that it's just absolutely clear that what took place by MPD, the officers in the death of Mr. Floyd, is absolutely unacceptable. That is something that we do not want to see from any law enforcement, and really any resident either. So we need to hold our law enforcement to a higher standard. So when we see what's unfolding out in our community, this is not simply the death of George Floyd. It's not simply the past few years of seeing videos of what many of us in the Black community have already known to be true around interactions with police. But this goes back 400 years when Black folks first started coming to this country as enslaved servants. And so this is generational trauma coming up, and that is what we're seeing out on our streets.
We heard the governor say that one Minnesota was not on display in the events as they've unfolded. It is a comprehensive effort to bring people together by the state. Can you talk a bit about one Minnesota and what needs to be done to return to that effort and to move forward?
Yes, One Minnesota, I love the vision of it around having a state that recognizes, celebrates, and includes difference and diversity as an asset for our state, which it 100% is. When we get down to the local level, we also have an incredibly diverse city here in Minneapolis. I represent North Minneapolis, which is actually one of the most diverse parts of our city and our state. What we're seeing is an action, a behavior coming up that is not reflective of those community values. We have folks who are coming from outside of our city who are agitating, who are causing damage. We have folks who are from our city who are dealing with trauma that's coming up. And so when we look at this vision of a welcoming, connected state and looking at it as an local elected official, having that within our neighborhoods and our communities, this behavior definitely is not reflective of the kind of interconnectivity that we want to see amongst neighbors.
Philippe, we've only got about 30 seconds, but I do want to get your thoughts on how Minneapolis can move forward now.
Absolutely. So first, we need to make sure and stand strong that accountability with these particular officers needs to happen. I hope to see arrest, charge, conviction, as well as we need to continue to build up alternative systems of public safety. So that looks like the public health approach to public safety with violence prevention strategies that have been proven to work. And so officers will say themselves that they are not the most
I'm very sorry. Philippe, I'm very sorry to jump in, but we absolutely out of time. But thank you so much, and we will continue to watch your community. Minneapolis City Council member Philippe Cunningham speaking to us from Minneapolis.